Peggy, there's the Supreme Court's hearing a case today, and I've been waiting for this case to be heard for some time because I think it's one of the most important political cases the Supreme Court's heard in a long time, and it actually feeds right into this discussion. And that is, they're going to be hearing arguments on gerrymandering. And I think in part, if people want to understand why the gun control debate is so extreme in the House of Representatives especially, all they have to do is look and see how those districts have been carved up. And it doesn't matter whether 90% of Americans want increased background checks to keep guns out of the hands of terrorists. In these carved out districts, enough of those vocal constituents are powerful enough that members fear their votes in primaries a lot more than they fear the NRA not giving them $5,000 or $10,000.
Yeah, and you have seen how some of those congressional districts are shaped and arranged state by state, really weird configurations to get certain voting blocks doing certain things. It creates a certain political stasis so that most incumbents feel safe, most Republicans, most Democrats. I'm glad it's being discussed. I have no insight into whether this is essentially a federal matter or a state matter, but certainly it's been on the minds of many people. It does keep things frozen. It almost makes you think of the word cartel, as if each of the parties has a certain cartel. Let me just throw in, though, Joe, I have obviously, as a citizen who loves America, I have complete sympathy for and for everybody who's extremely upset, everybody who's coming forward with ideas. I never think it's the wrong time to talk about gun control. I always think it's a fine time.
Not now, when?
That having been said, we have all been through this so many times. I am starting to think that there are some problems that cannot be solved. They can be managed. And I think what we've been going through with all of this gun violence the past few decades is something we can manage better. My own thing, very much on my heart the past few years, is please, we need more mental health services. The man who did the shooting in Vegas doesn't fit the normal demographic. Normally it is young men who are unstable, who've been veering towards violence, who've been acting odd for a long time. The neighbors always say, oh, he stuck pretty much to himself. He was this, he was that. There are untreated mentally ill people in America who need more intervention, especially young men about whom nothing can be done until they hurt someone. So that's my contribution for today.
And all the people said, amen.
Yeah.
We certainly agree with that.
Congressman Hyams, it's Willie Geist. I want to ask you just to get specific, because these obviously are all different. These cases from Newtown in your state to Orlando last year to Congressman Scalise and your colleagues being shot on a baseball field in Virginia earlier this year. But let's talk about the one in front of us, because it just happened. What is the specific law you think, in an ideal world, the Congress there where you're standing could pass that would have stopped what we saw? Because this man, according to 2 Nevada gun shop owners, passed background checks. He didn't fit that mental illness profile from what we know right now. So what would you recommend in terms of legislation that could have stopped this shooter? Because I think you do have to be specific if you want to be constructive about what to do to stop these.
Yeah, and look, it's a fair question, but I don't want the point to drift away from the fact that if we just focus on what would have stopped this particular shooter, which was an incident which was pretty different from the gun violence that takes 90 lives every single day, 2/3 of those deaths being suicides, we can get distracted. So let me answer your question, but then let's say there are things that we need to do to stop that kind of thing. There are things we need to do in Chicago. Yes, there's mental health, and there's lots of other things. So look, this is a weird case because it's hard for us to understand. If this guy had been a Muslim radical, we'd know exactly how to think about this. If this had been like the shooter in Sandy Hook, a deeply disturbed individual, we'd know how to think about this. We don't know how to think about this because this seems like a well-adjusted individual, except for the fact that he appears to have had something like 36 guns, some of which were modifiable to wreak the kind of havoc that Marines wreak when they land on an enemy beach. So inasmuch as you really want to focus on this particular incident, which is I'm not sure the right way to think about America's gun problems, yeah, we ought to look at the fact that it appears that American citizens can buy dozens and dozens and dozens of weapons, some of which are military.
I can focus
I
on
think
this.
that's
I can
very
focus on this
well
incident.
put.
Can I help you out here? How you can focus on this incident and ask why a guy has 36 guns that are suitable
An
for
arsenal.
suitable for running on the beaches of Normandy and shooting Nazis. Again, don't listen to pundits. Don't listen to politicians. Talk to any law enforcement officer in America who is responsible for protecting you, your family, my family, the families of Chicago and this country, and ask those law enforcement officers whether they think that guy or any civilian should even have one. They will tell you. Bratton will tell you, no. Right?
Yes.
Tierney will tell you no.
And Congressman, that's what I meant by getting specific. So are you talking about then a ban on semi-automatic rifles, for example?
Yes, I think Joe's absolutely right, and I think he's right in how law enforcement thinks about this. Look, law enforcement is sometimes on the opposite end of the weaponry that should be in the hands of the United States Marines and our military. So yes, and I understand that this is tough. How do you define an assault rifle? I get that. It's hard.
Let me stop you there. It is tough. And the gun lobby will always go there, and no matter what you say ban assault rifles. Well, they've been banned since 1930. Okay, well then ban semi-automatic weapons. They go, well, oh, so now you're trying to take my pistol.
Well, remember,
so let's
we have
keep
no
this simple.
assault ban
Let's
now.
keep this simple. If a civilian
The assault ban is
if a
gone.
civilian has a weapon that can shoot through police armor, go through the policeman's body, should go through another person's body and kill both of them at the same time, I think maybe we can define that as something that civilians don't need.
That's a pretty good start.
And let them define their way around that one. Or if the House gets their way and they try to make silencers this week, if they try to make those more readily available for civilians, so police officers didn't know where the shooting was coming from
Are we really
in Las
talking
Vegas.
about this?
I mean, is that something that Americans need?
There's no way.
Congressman, one other aspect. Let's go to the human nature aspect of this. How do you feel, as a resident of Connecticut, who lives less than 25 miles from Newtown, how do you feel about mingling with every day, slapping them on the back every day, smiling and saying hello every day, to people in the House of Representatives who have, over the years, repeatedly made a conscious decision, a deliberate decision, to vote to do nothing to stop the transportation of rifles meant for mass killings, to legislate common sense things to try to prevent or dwindle the number of mass killings? How do you feel about hanging around with them?
Well, I've been pretty clear on my feelings on this. I said after Orlando that I'm not participating in moments of silence taking place in rooms where you could fix this problem to a large extent. But it's worse than that. Right now, as we speak, somewhere in this building, the leadership is trying to figure out what the decent interval of time is between the horrific murders in Las Vegas and when they can bring forward the bill that Joe was making reference to that would make it a lot easier for people to get silencers. What's the right amount of time? Is it 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Now, look, to answer the question, I need to work with these folks, and I want to do that, and that's my job. But the American people need to start holding their representatives accountable for not doing a couple of the things that we know have massive support in this country.
All right, Congressman, thank you so much for being with us at this
Thank
point
you.
in the show.
Times.
I feel like I have to make my regular disclaimer. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I believe that Heller was passed properly. There are quite a few people in this audience that will disagree with me. I think the Second Amendment means what the Second Amendment means, that Americans have a right to keep and bear arms, to have weapons in their home, to be able to protect their families. I don't think the Second Amendment means what liberals think the Second Amendment means. It means you have a right to keep and bear arms. But I also believe what the majority of members of the NRA believe, that these weapons are not needed. You know, after Newtown, Mika, So many of my friends from Northwest Florida, so many people who voted for me that are members of the NRA said, you know what? I just don't need those weapons to go
That's
out
right.
and kill deer.
You just don't.
You know why you need those weapons?
there's no logic
to
to
kill
it.
humans. That's what those weapons are
That's
for.
what they're used for.
Joe,
Yeah.
how do you convince the outliers that...
What do you mean outliers? Mike, 90% of Americans agree with me.
No, I know, but...
By the way, Ronald Reagan
Let
agreed
Mike
with my
ask a
position.
question.
Not only on this, George W. Bush agreed with this position.
But you-
Ronald Reagan believed
Yeah.
that assault weapons should be banned. George
listen.
W. Bush believed assault weapons could be banned. The extreme.
That's
this
what I'm
has
talking
been
about.
pushed to the extreme. This is 10% of the population.
But how do you convince them in the Congress, in the House and the Senate, that if you like your gun, you can keep your gun, it's okay, but you got to stop buying these AR-15s and modulating them.
First of all, I would never say if you like your gun, you can keep your gun. Because then they go,
But that's what they're afraid
Barack
of.
Obama.
Right.
That's what they're afraid
Well, you know
of.
what, though? Let's be really honest about this. And Peggy, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but it seems to me, Bill O'Reilly tweeted yesterday or
Oh, my
said
God.
yesterday, this is the price of freedom.
Please, please.
No. Actually,
we've really-
and I've seen it
we've-
firsthand.
Yeah.
Campaigning. I've seen it firsthand. You've probably seen it firsthand as well. There's a sense of paranoia that is purposefully ginned up by the NRA
Yeah, no.
to say they're coming to get your guns. And it's been that way. Back in 1994, people would say they're going to come get my guns and they're going to have to pry them out of my cold, dead hands. I said, listen, I tell you what, they're not going to come get your guns. Your cold, dead hands, you can just shake them out. You're going to be fine.
Let me throw out a question. How many Americans do we have any sense of this? We know that there's just about one gun for every American. In 2009, when
Right.
the population was 310 million, turned out we had 310 million guns. Okay, how many Americans have these AK-47-like, assault rifle-like, repeat guns? I'm sorry, I forget the phrase when it goes.
Yeah.
Pip, 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 right.
Automatic ammo.
Yeah, semi-automatic and automatic. How many have them, and why? Why? What are they
What's the
afraid
motivation?
of? I don't think we can so easily say they just want them to kill other Americans.
Well,
most of them don't.
So last hour,
There's
I can
a
tell
reason. Tell me.
Whenever I got into these debates after Newtown with my Second Amendment friends, people that had been on the same side
As
me, fighting, so the Second Amendment would mean what the Second Amendment means, you would just keep pushing. So, but what do you need them, though? But why do you need them?
Why do you want them?
Because they need them in case the government comes. And they think that they'll have to use them to protect themselves against government crime. To which I said to one person on there, I said, my friend, let me tell you, let's just break this down. He finally admitted it. He was the first. I said, let me just break this down for you. If that day comes, they're not going to knock on your door. They're going to put a drone over your head, and it's going to float there for 3 days. And then they're going to give you 3 or 4 days to let your children, your wife come out.
Okay.
See,
And
I
then
have these conversations,
and
too.
then you come out with your weapon, your AR-15. Aim it up at the drone. They'll melt you. See, this is the lunacy of it. I'm going to have my... Now, if the federal government wants to get you, the federal government's going to get you. Your little gun's not going to do anything.
My sense of it is, I don't hear that so much, but what I do hear is there is a sense that society is collapsing. The culture is collapsing.
it's-
We're collapsing in
one of the-
crime. The world is collapsing. Crazy people with bad haircuts have nukes. Everything's going bad, terrorism, etc. They want to be fully armed
For the
on their
apocalypse.
hill at home.
Well, it's the
One of the
same
big elements.
And you can say the same thing you do,
For
but
the-
you'll lose.
For the apocalypse.
But they're
yes.
Americans, and they want
I
to
hear
go
that.
down fighting.
I hear that too. They want it for the apocalypse. They want it so when people come to get their food supply.
They want it for
and
when
one
the
of-
grid goes down. They
One-
want it for...
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a whole... I mean, not to
But what are
turn
they
dire
fed?
in
What
the
are
middle of
they
the
fed?
morning, but they're
What
frightened.
are they fed? Take a look and listen to our politics over the last 3 decades. It's the politics of fear. not the politics of hope. You grow your candidacy on fear.
And
be
survival
afraid of the
seats
other.
and Fox.
Be afraid of the immigrant. Be afraid of the gays. Be afraid of the culture being stripped from you. It's the politics of fear. Someone is always out there lurking to take something from you.
And
defend yourself.
And following up on what you said,
Which
Peggy.
brought us Trump.
Maybe, Peggy, well, a lot of things brought us Trump. Maybe this is the net result of people growing up over the past 15 to 17 years and seeing one failure after the other. 1999 impeachment, 2000, the recount, where we can't even elect a president the right way. 2001, 9/11, and not getting that right. 2002 WMDs, 2003 Iraq, 2005 Katrina, 2006 the meltdown in Iraq, 2008 the meltdown of the stock market. I could continue. I don't need to. Where confidence in this government has been shattered, and perhaps that's what leads to the paranoia that you're talking about. They're not going to protect me. They're not going to defend me. I've got to defend myself and my family.
Yeah, and you can add societal things like our families collapse. There are drugs around. I am a man and I can't find a job to support my family. There's all sorts of stuff that I think is roiling us. A generalized fear that you see some other countries gloat about, that maybe America's on the way down, not the way up.
Right.
When people are thinking that they are Americans, we grew up in a certain culture, they will gun up.
The place in the world
Yeah,
has been
I think,
lost.
but I think a lot about the reasons for these things.
Well, I think for Bill O'Reilly, there is no freedom in fear. That's where this turns, and they have pushed this fear agenda to a point that people are paralyzed to go out of their house. They're paralyzed to get on the internet.
That's the price of freedom?
If
Great.
that's the price of freedom,
Joining
then you
us
really have
now.
nothing.
Yeah, and that Glenn Beck used to sell survival seeds
That's
on
what I
his TV
tell
show.
you. I'm saying
And we
it's
joked about it, but
it's
this
funny, but it's not.
has been fed
Survival seeds.
to a group of Americans now for 30 years.
Yeah, and it definitely
and
for a good decade.
These are the costs.
Before it came
I'm
to
not saying what happened yesterday
close.
was the cost. We're talking about the cultural in general, though. Why are people running out and buying these guns? Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.